In the criminal underworld of 1970s and 1980s New York, there were two men who couldn't have been more different. One was the flashy, self-assured John Gotti, famously known as the Dapper Don, the head of the powerful Gambino crime family. He reveled in luxury, flaunting expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, and a movie star's poise. Wherever he went, he turned heads. The media followed him closely. The FBI watched his every move, and he seemed to enjoy the attention, embodying the public image of a mob boss with pride. And then there was Vincent Gigante, the polar opposite. Known as the Chin, the boss of the equally powerful Genovese family, he appeared as though he had wandered off the pages of a psychiatric case study. Dressed in a worn bathrobe and slippers, his hair unkempt, he would shuffle aimlessly through the streets of Greenwich Village, muttering nonsense to himself. Sometimes, FBI agents would find him standing in his shower, holding an open umbrella. To the average New Yorker, he looked like just another unfortunate soul. A confused, perhaps homeless man battered by life. But behind this mask of madness hid one of the sharpest minds in organized crime. A strategic genius who for 30 years played law enforcement like a well-tuned instrument. Vincent Gigante wasn't insane. He was a master manipulator, a man who turned feigned mental illness into an impenetrable shield against prosecution. And his greatest achievement? Fooling the FBI, the courts, and the public for decades. It all began in 1970, when Gigante was still just a capo in the Genovese hierarchy, not yet its leader. Facing bribery charges in New Jersey, he took an extraordinary step. He began faking mental illness. Psychiatrists testified that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, delusional episodes, and rapidly declining mental health. These claims helped him avoid prosecution and, more importantly, planted the seed of the myth that would become his legacy. After the charges were dropped, Gigante didn't abandon the ruse. Quite the opposite. He perfected it. He checked himself into psychiatric hospitals on a regular basis and carefully constructed a routine of bizarre public behavior. He would wander the streets in pajamas, mumble incoherently, or drool in front of agents watching him. It was theater, and he was a method actor. Even his brother, a Catholic priest, spoke to the press about Vincent's supposed delusions and hallucinations, dating back to the late 1960s. Coming from a relative, and a man of the cloth, no less. These claims only deepened the illusion. As Gigante rose to become the boss of the Genovese family, his act took on new importance. Now, it wasn't just about dodging courtrooms. It was about hiding his position in one of America's most powerful crime syndicates. He imposed strict rules. No one in the family was to say his name aloud. Instead, members would gesture toward their chins when referring to him, hence the nickname the Chin. It was a brilliant tactic to avoid wiretap evidence. Gigante conducted much of his business in the early morning, believing the FBI surveillance teams would be less alert. The rest of the day, he lived his act. Shuffling through the streets, muttering nonsense, putting on a show so convincing that even seasoned FBI agents began to doubt what they saw. One agent famously remarked, "This guy acts insane 23 hours a day, but somehow finds 1 hour to run the most powerful Mafia family in the US. Is he crazy? He's the only one not in prison. Maybe he's a genius." Eventually, law enforcement decided they'd had enough. In 1990, Gigante was arrested at his mother's house and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and more. When reporters asked his mother about her son's alleged position, she shrugged it off, saying, "Vincenzo, he's the boss of the toilet." Her feigned shock echoed the entire facade Gigante had built. But the trial didn't happen right away. For 7 years, his lawyers delayed proceedings, claiming he was mentally unfit to stand trial. They brought in prestigious neurologists and psychologists who insisted that Gigante suffered from severe dementia and neurocognitive decline. Dr. Wilfred G. Van Gorp from Columbia University testified that Gigante had moderate to severe dementia reflecting significant central nervous system dysfunction. But ultimately, the jury wasn't swayed. The evidence, and perhaps their instincts, told a different story. In 1997, Gigante was convicted and sentenced to at least 10 years in federal prison. But even behind bars, he kept up the act. Guards and investigators noted his continued bizarre behavior until he slipped. Surveillance caught him giving orders, speaking clearly and rationally. One day, he reportedly told a prison guard, "No one messes with me." Not exactly the words of a helpless lunatic. Faced with new charges for running the Genovese family from prison, Gigante finally confessed. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, admitting that he had spent years deceiving the courts by faking insanity. "The game is over," declared U.S. Attorney Roslyn R. Mouskoff. "Vincent Gigante was a cunning fraud, and we in law enforcement always knew it was an act. But it had taken 30 years to prove it. 30 years in which one man outwitted the most powerful legal institutions in the United States with nothing but a bathrobe, a mumble, and a lie so perfect it became truth.